So usually when we come to the end of a project like gender equality in public administration, there is a bit of sadness because it has been really a very intense period, and we had so many things. And now, today, we have also the pleasure to have the person in the International Scientific Committee with us. And we have also other guests that are going to introduce the international conference. So there is always a bit, as I was saying, a bit of sadness, but also the awareness that we have reached so far, at least considering our objective. And we can see, or better, you cannot see, but they are hidden in the web. People also attending this conference, and then there will be also the possibility to, given that we are going to record it, to follow it online. So let's start soon because we have so many guests, and it is a pleasure to have them taking part to this conference. As you know, Gender Equality in Public Administration is a project that has different aims and objectives, training with a formal gender equality management course, and also lots of seminar, a cycle of seminar. And this is really the international conference that we decided not for a chance to put at the end of this path, because we wanted also to share with other institutions what were the main results and our reflection upon the role of public institutions and organizations in the achievement of gender equality. We have with us also Tommaso Fabbri, who is the director of the economic department Marco Biagi, and Carlotta Serra, who is the director of the Marco Biagi Foundation, where we are now, that hosted most, not all, of the initiatives. And with us also Cecilia Robustelli, who is from the Department of Languages and Culture of our university, and she's part of the scientific committee. And also we have Gule Gunluksenesen and Angela Hagan, who are part of the scientific committee. And as international guest, we have also Paola Rodriguez Modronio from the University Pablo della Vide. And I will now ask to Donatella Porzi to come with us in order to introduce her speech. Basically, I will tell you something about Donatella Porzi. She comes from the Comitato delle Regioni, and we have her with us because I will say something in English, then Donatella will talk in Italian, and I will do a summary of her speech for the people who are here who are English speaking. So the European Committee of the Regions is the voice of regions and cities in the European Union. It represents local and regional authorities across the European Union and advises on new laws that have an impact on regions and cities. Donatella Porzi is also a member of the Renew Europe group of the Committee of the Regions and her political committee, because also I'm very happy to say that we talk about acting for equality, but then there are people here in this room, and also another one who will come, that have also a very big effort in really reaching in the political arena the gender equality. So as I was saying, her political commitment started in 2004 with her election and appointment as councillor for educational, youth and social policy in the municipality of Cannara. From 2009 and 2014, Donatella Porzi was Councillor for Culture, Youth, Social Equality, Equal Opportunities. And here is another person who also shared the effort in coming to the arena, is Caterina Arciprete from Florence, and Equal Opportunities and European Policies at provincial level. She was also a member of the Council and President of the Legislative Assembly of the Umbria region from 2015 and 2019. So Donatella, the floor is yours, and I will from time to time translate what you
Thank you. Thank you. Excuse me, because I prepare my speech in Italian and I want to be precious. So I use something. Thank you. You don't say that I am a teacher. this is my work,
Yes,
in my life, and
that is very important.
I am very happy to say it, because it's a very privilegious position to see a lot of things. Molto bene. Hai detto che ho avuto l'onere di portare a compimento un parere sulla violenza di genere nello scorso anno. In realtà su queste materie ne ho fatti 2 di pareri. Il primo, nel pre-Covid, fui incaricata di elaborare un parere relativo ai bilanci e alla programmazione 21-27, perché ci fossero delle somme importanti riservate proprio alle quote di genere, in quanto sappiamo quanto questo impatta poi sul nostro sistema nel suo complesso. Ci tengo a sottolineare che è stato un lavoro molto complicato quello che abbiamo svolto in questo anno, che ci ha consentito intanto di conoscere una realtà molto variegata, quella dei 27 paesi europei, che compongono appunto il nostro comitato, e soprattutto che ci ha consentito di provare ad arrivare ad un fattore comune denominatore che tenesse in piedi le istanze politiche di tante famiglie europee, cosa che non è stata assolutamente semplice e che ha, diciamo, visto una serie di mediazioni importanti. Ci tengo a sottolineare,
Donatella, maybe I just say
yes,
something, that Donatella is going to talk about specifically about violence against women, but she wanted to stress that she had also to write an advice upon the role of budgeting and also the space of resources specifically for quotas. And also she was stressing the extent of difficulties in putting together all the different parts that are in the European region in terms of different policies and different also opinions.
Grazie. Abbiamo fatto anche tantissimi incontri con operatori e amministratori diffusi in tutta Europa, e devo dirvi che la cosa che mi ha messo più in difficoltà è stato incontrare i giovani amministratori, coloro i quali si aspettavano da noi, che eravamo su quest'altra posizione, che fossimo in grado di poter accettare tutte le loro istanze, tutte le loro richieste. Io ho concluso questa serie di incontri con i giovani amministratori dicendo: guardate, il risultato finale, il prodotto che porteremo in aula e che sarà approvato, sarà sicuramente un testo un po' a ribasso rispetto alle vostre aspettative. E questa vostra delusione io la comprendo, la giustifico in anticipo. È quello che saremo riusciti a fare. Prendetelo come un pezzo del nostro impegno, del nostro percorso, per battaglie che hanno bisogno di tempi molto lunghi e a volte ci impongono anche, lasciatemi il termine, di accontentarci di quello che riusciamo ad ottenere in quel particolare contesto storico, sociale e politico, che non è poco.
So I think Donatella Porzi is saying that probably the most difficult part was to talk with young administrators who had lots of expectation, but she knew already that given to the fact that there are some compromises and the historical moment is such that she already told them that what we could achieve in the main room after all these consultations would have been less than she expected. Also, I didn't translate a very important thing that Donatella said at the very beginning, that she feels herself, she's a teacher, a lecturer, so that is very important point in her point of view, to know the reality and to interpret also the reality.
Grazie. Allora, partiamo da alcuni dati. In Europa 1/3 della popolazione femminile adulta ha subito atti di violenza fisica o sessuale almeno una volta nella vita. Il 20% delle donne in giovane età ha subito molestie sessuali online. Una donna su 5 è stata vittima di atti persecutori. Una donna su 20 è stata stuprata. Più di una donna su 10 ha subito violenze sessuali implicanti la mancanza di consenso o l'uso di forza. Sono numeri agghiaccianti, già su questo qualcuno di noi qua dovrebbe essere, diciamo così, nella casistica, però sono numeri agghiaccianti che ci offrono uno spaccato delle nostre comunità e sono dati comunque sui pochi dati certificati che abbiamo, perché un altro grave elemento su cui dobbiamo ragionare è che non abbiamo tanti dati a disposizione e soprattutto non abbiamo dati, diciamo, comparabili, perché non soltanto da paese a paese esistono delle diverse situazioni nel raccogliere i dati, ma anche all'interno dello stesso paese, pensiamo alla nostra Italia, cosa accade in una grande città e come può essere monitorato il sistema, la situazione in piccole realtà, già questo ci offre uno spaccato dove le differenze sono enormi e dove comunque ci muoviamo in un campo che è ancora una grande nebulosa.
I will start from the last statement that it's very difficult to find data and also reliable data on violence against women, especially when we talk about a small city, small town. So what is happening is that she shared some certified results that are really astonishing. Because as you can see, in Europe, at least 1/3 of the population, of female population, has been subject of physical or sexual violence at least once in their life. And 20% of women in youth age have been also molested online. And 1 on 5 has been subject of persecutory act. And also there is a sexual violence 1 on 20. And also something that more than 1 woman upon 10 has been a subject of sexual harassment without any consent and with the use of threat.
Adesso passiamo un attimo ad analizzare quali sono i costi sanitari e sociali, proprio in termini di cifre fredde, aride. Al di là delle sofferenze individuali che rappresentano veramente un portato estremamente forte e duro, ecco, si stima che la violenza contro le donne, compresa quella domestica, che è un aspetto molto importante, generi nell'Unione Europea fino a 280 miliardi di euro in spese sanitarie e sociali, così ripartite. Il 56% per quanto concerne l'aspetto fisico ed emotivo, il 21% per quanto riguarda i costi della giustizia penale, il 14% per la perdita di produzione economica e altri costi come quelli legati poi alla ricerca di un alloggio, di protezioni per quanto riguarda i minori. Qui abbiamo soltanto, diciamo, analizzato e fotografato i costi, senza dare importanza, ma non perché non lo vogliamo fare, semplicemente per avere una rappresentazione di quanto grave sia la situazione sotto il punto di vista economico, per poi aprire uno spaccato su quelle che sono le questioni, diciamo, di natura personale, individuale, la sofferenza, i traumi e tutto quello che concerne una psicologia che sicuramente sarà segnata a vita da esperienze che non si cancellano.
So there is also an estimate of the cost of violence, which is around 289 billions of euros in health and social expenditure. In the physical and emotional impact amount of 56% of this amount. There are costs related to justice, to penal justice. Legal justice is 21%. And also, of course, there is a loss in income production in the growth, which is about 14%. And there are also other costs related to the helping funding a house and in protecting children. Of course, Donatella is stressing that this is just an estimate to show the relevance, economic relevance of the problem, but the costs are really underestimated considering the impact on the life of the woman and all the people who are assisting to this, and we would say society as a whole.
Sì, tornando un attimo al parere che è stato redatto all'interno della commissione SEDEC che si occupa di queste materie, ecco, il titolo era appunto fermare la violenza di genere, le città e le regioni sono in prima linea. Che cosa volevamo rappresentare? Intanto, ecco, cosa abbiamo raccolto dalle diverse esperienze dei 27 paesi. Per fare questo abbiamo propinato all'inizio dell'esperienza un questionario a tutti i membri della commissione che ci hanno restituito una fotografia, e da lì abbiamo potuto vedere che i paesi si dividono in 3 categorie. Una categoria che dà molta importanza al tema e quindi lavora in questa direzione, una categoria meno interessata che giudica alcune esperienze, alcuni risultati raggiunti, un obiettivo positivo, e una terza categoria che non calcola, diciamo, del tutto il problema e che lo rilega a situazioni non di prioritaria importanza. Il lavoro è durato 1 anno. E guardate, la programmazione della discussione in plenaria ha visto proprio la data del 29 novembre del 2023, data che ha coinciso con un fatto che ha scosso diciamo, le coscienze non soltanto del nostro paese, perché era proprio a ridosso del grave femminicidio commesso dal fidanzato nei confronti di Giulia Cecchettin, quindi c'era stato quest'eco mediatico che ha portato anche quelle forze politiche, mi riferisco poi al nostro paese, un pochino più resistenti, qualcuno non voleva neanche che venisse discussa una materia di questo genere all'interno del comitato, a cercare di trovare le soluzioni perché potesse venire approvata all'unanimità e quindi perché fossero limate le questioni che magari potevano imbarazzare, ma potete immaginare cosa avrebbe significato una parte politica non votare in un momento come quello, diciamo, un parere. Cosa volevamo fare? Cosa vogliamo fare con i pareri che elabora il Comitato delle Regioni, che è un organo essenzialmente consultivo rispetto, diciamo, a quello che poi il Parlamento può fare? Portare ad azioni condivise quanto più possibili condivise, perché poi esistono delle differenze insuperabili che non ci consentono di calare a foglia morta qualsiasi cosa si realizza in un luogo, in un altro contesto, in un altro territorio, dove cultura, storia non ci permettono di, ma per quanto possibile di condividere e sollecitare la Commissione europea e quindi gli Stati membri, proprio perché nel quadro finanziario pluriennale e nei bilanci nazionali venisse introdotto questo bilancio di genere, che era stato oggetto anche di un mio precedente parere fatto con un'altra commissione, la Coter, proprio perché venissero allocate, diciamo, cifre e quote, risorse finanziarie sufficienti per sostenere e combattere anche adeguatamente le violenze di genere. Faccio un inciso, parliamo di violenze di genere pensando spesso alle donne, in realtà noi ci riferiamo anche a tutte le forme di violenza e quindi è uno spaccato che prende le donne come punto di riferimento perché sono il genere maggiormente colpito dalla... E poi magari qui faremo una specifica perché... prego.
First of all, she wanted to say that she is talking about gender-based violence, and but also there are because also she's always referring to women because they are the most victims of this violence. But of course, they were talking about gender-based violence in general. I suppose also including non-binary people. And so I wanted to just to summarize. I will start with this fact that the advice has been issued in a very important moment for Italy and for Europe as a whole, because around the 25th of November last year, a young student, Giulia Cecchettin, has been killed by the fiancé in so this important case of femicide. She was attending the University of Padua and she was about to be graduated. So this very important fact moved also the Italian part that was a bit uncertain whether to take part to the meeting, to the General Assembly, but they then were there. And so please correct me afterwards if I may say something incorrect. But so what happens was that the European Committee of Region issued an advice on the 29th of November 2023. After this advice, there will be action. There should be actions taken by the European Commission, but also Donatella was basically stressing the important fact that actions would imply also money. And in order to get resources to gender-based violence in this case, but also to quotas, as you were saying before. There is a very important effort that should be made at the European level, that is gender budgeting.
Allora, quali sono i punti essenziali di questo parere? Diciamo che le azioni si suddividono in quattro temi importanti. Il primo è la raccolta dei dati. Non possiamo, diciamo così, parlare, valutare quello che non conosciamo, no? E ragionare su questa raccolta di dati per cercare di smussare le differenze che tra paese e paese abbiamo registrato è molto importante, come vi dicevo prima. Intervenire sulla prevenzione, proprio cercare di trovare le misure necessarie per un cambiamento immediato e devo dire che in questo contesto abbiamo raccolto molte esperienze che sono state sperimentate in alcuni contesti. Qui ne cito soltanto alcuni: la creazione di spazi sicuri per le donne in particolari situazioni, l'illuminazione che va migliorata in alcuni punti, l'accesso ai trasporti pubblici durante le ore notturne, anche la strutturazione di un codice diciamo non verbale, ma proprio attraverso il linguaggio del corpo, per poter comunicare uno stato di difficoltà. Il terzo grande punto, che a mio avviso rappresenta un po', diciamo, il cuore di una progettazione che può riguardare una rivoluzione copernicana, è l'educazione. Un'educazione che deve pretendere veramente un cambiamento sociale duraturo nel tempo. Quindi a chi come me ha ricoperto e ricopre ruoli nelle istituzioni, dico che non ci possiamo accendere e spegnere a seconda di quello che accade. Ci sono tematiche sulle quali dobbiamo essere costanti e continui, anche perché la società cresce con noi, no? Quello che noi diamo per assodato, per acquisito, nelle nuove generazioni, nei nuovi contesti che incrociamo, determinano la necessità di non abbassare mai la guardia su alcune tematiche e cercare veramente di metterle nella nostra formazione a tutti i livelli, stabilire un equilibrato, corretto rapporto tra i generi, stabilire un rapporto di rispetto, di non prevaricazione e soprattutto capire che esiste un mondo, quello appunto dei social, dei media, che sta diventando che è diventato già estremamente pericoloso e che rappresenta un luogo nel quale può accadere tanto e di tutto. L'altro grande punto è quello della protezione delle vittime, perché c'è un dato molto importante che anche qui a macchia di leopardo nelle varie situazioni rappresenta una variabile molto, no? Il fatto che le donne spesso, o chi subisce violenza, non denuncia. Non denuncia perché tutto quello che può avvenire successivamente non le mette in condizione di poter essere garantite, sicure e soprattutto libere da certi contesti, anche da certe dipendenze economiche che a volte rappresentano l'elemento per il quale non si riesce a sciogliere in tempi giusti, ragionevoli, magari un legame che sta diventando tossico e pericoloso. Quindi tutta questa fase dell'assistenza è una cosa non secondaria e presuppone una organizzazione e veramente una serie di contesti pronti all'uso e alla necessità che qualsiasi società deve avere al suo interno. Non possiamo aspettare che arrivi la denuncia per poter in qualche maniera agire. E qui aggiungo un'altra parentesi che è emersa un po' anche da questi confronti che abbiamo fatto. Tanto il mondo della scuola ci ha raccontato quante violenze sono state, diciamo così, sono emerse anche grazie ai racconti, ai disegni che i bambini fanno, che riescono a mettere in luce dei punti di difficoltà che magari diversamente non si sarebbero colti. Ecco, la necessità di formare il personale che è in contatto con le persone, diciamo, che magari possono soltanto attraverso la mimica gestuale, il linguaggio del corpo, rappresentare un momento di disagio. Io mi occupo anche di sport perché sono il presidente della scuola regionale dello sport della mia regione, no? E apprezzo molto che il CONI si sia mosso nella direzione di fare un protocollo che con grandi difficoltà stiamo cercando di mettere a terra, che è quello di stabilire anche all'interno di certi ambienti un comportamento adeguato e una soglia di vigilanza alta perché certe situazioni possano essere portate da subito, diciamo, all'attenzione del mondo degli adulti che magari ignari lasciano anche i propri figli all'interno di strutture che noi solitamente definiamo e consideriamo protette e sicure. Quindi c'è un mondo che si apre e una formazione che va dagli operatori scolastici a tutti i livelli, dagli insegnanti al personale ATA, agli operatori sportivi, ma io penso anche ai pubblici, alle forze dell'ordine, dove ci si rivolge al personale sanitario, dove spesso si arriva dopo una situazione che ha generato delle difficoltà e che sta in qualche maniera che deve essere soccorsa, cioè non possiamo lasciare le persone ore ed ore in una stanza di pronto soccorso. Quindi alcune buone pratiche che si sono strutturate, per esempio anche nella mia realtà Umbra di Foligno, di una stanza rosa per l'accoglienza di persone che arrivano dopo una violenza in un pronto soccorso, rappresenta un modo per poter in qualche maniera, diciamo, accogliere meglio. Ma il dopo, il momento d'emergenza e tutto quello che segue, la protezione dei minori coinvolti, la protezione della donna, il suo inserimento in un ambiente lavorativo, la sua possibilità di essere anche allontanata da chi reca danno alla sua incolumità fisica, rappresenta un mondo sul quale abbiamo già sentito abbastanza leggendo e aprendo le cronache dei nostri giornali. Scusa. Sì, sì, vado veloce.
No, but now I'm going to translate and summarize. So I would say that Donatella was saying that, first of all, what was his advice? The advice consisted both in first to reflect what the survey that they did also in all the regions, basically reflecting heterogeneity. So there are cases where we can see, for instance, important best practices like taking care to prevent gender-based violence, basically to be very careful with the light.
Anche il microfono.
Maybe you can suppress. So basically, in order to prevent it, you have to be really careful about some external situation that can put especially women in a very dangerous situation. But most of the time, the dangerous situation is within the household, and there is a whole issue of education, and also Donatella was talking about what is happening in the sport, because she's basically directing
Scuola regionale dello sport,
the regional school of sport in Umbria, and it is very important also to train people who are there in the sport activities involved in order to catch any problem of violence, because the very important point is that as the data show us, there is a lot of underreporting. And why there is underreporting is also connected on what is happening afterwards. Even when a woman is victim of physical violence, the very impact of going to the first aid and left with all people there waiting for. And so she was also mentioning a specific best practice in Umbria, in Foligno, in Foligno, a pink room where the person who has been subjected to violence can, gender-based violence, can stay waiting for the moment. But what is happening afterwards? We know that there are many problems of secondary victimization for women. So they also in the legal process, they are subjected to a very difficult situation, and also they are not protected enough. And there is an issue that it is connected with other points that we will tackle also in our international conference connected to having lower wages and lower power within the house. So most of the time it's also very difficult having done it to what to do afterwards, what is happening. So,
una velocissima carrellata la farò sulle, diciamo, sui perché una parità di genere è da perseguire, quali sono le motivazioni che rendono, diciamo, necessario lavorare in questa direzione. Intanto c'è un aumento della produttività e dell'innovazione. I team che sono composti da uomini e donne portano comunque a soluzioni più creative e idee più innovative. C'è un miglioramento nel processo decisionale. Gli studi dimostrano che i gruppi composti da uomini e donne prendono decisioni migliori perché hanno una gamma di punti di vista più ampia, più vasta. Migliori sono i risultati finanziari a maggior redditività, quindi le aziende che hanno appunto una maggiore diversità di genere, soprattutto a livello apicale, perché quindi notiamo che ancora esiste una grande difficoltà nei ruoli apicali, tendono ad ottenere risultati finanziari migliori. Migliore è anche l'acquisizione della fidelizzazione dei talenti. Sicuramente chi riesce a dare maggiori garanzie risulta ad essere più attraente anche perché c'è un trattamento equo dei dipendenti per quanto riguarda i compensi, perché c'è meno turnover e tutto questo rende sicuramente un'azienda, un'impresa, ma anche un'organizzazione sociale, un'amministrazione più produttiva. Altro elemento che è stato testato, non sono mie impressioni, ecco, c'è un aumento della crescita economica. Il coinvolgimento delle donne nella forza lavoro aumenta la produttività economica complessiva. Ci sono redditi familiari più elevati che aiutano sicuramente a rendere la vita di una famiglia sicuramente migliore rispetto alle situazioni dove a lavorare è soltanto uno dei due coniugi. Si riduce la povertà e aumenta la salute e il benessere, perché l'indipendenza economica sicuramente ha un impatto importante sia sulla salute fisica che mentale. Mi fermo.
Yes. And so there are many important factors, because we were talking about gender equality. Gender equality is very important, in fact, both on the economic growth, both on what is happening within the family with a reduced probability of falling into poverty. Then there is also an improved satisfaction, job satisfaction within the job within the working place, for having a more attention to diversity and to gender equality, and also of course there is improved reputation, but also the literature that she's referring to shows also that there is a positive impact of having more diverse heterogeneous team in the workplace.
Sì, quindi gli impatti positivi sono sulla stabilità sociale, in quanto una società con una maggiore parità di genere tende ad avere una maggiore coesione e anche tassi più bassi di violenza domestica e di criminalità, perché in una società più inclusiva tutti gli individui possono partecipare, diciamo, pienamente alla condivisione del progetto, della situazione nella quale si vive, perché c'è un miglior accesso all'istruzione e ai risultati scolastici sono sicuramente più elevati, e per la partecipazione politica e civica attraverso una governance inclusiva abbiamo sicuramente una risposta agli interessi e ai bisogni della popolazione che sono sicuramente più alti. Quindi quando le donne hanno pari diritti e opportunità, hanno una maggiore possibilità di impegnarsi nelle attività civiche e nello sviluppo di una comunità, contribuendo alla crescita della stessa.
So basically, Donatella was saying that inclusive society can have a positive impact on reducing violence because it is a more inclusive environment, and also there can be a better access to education. And she was mentioning also the importance of inclusive governance, showing that having the equal opportunities, women can then better also engage themselves in the political arena and can have a word on that.
L'ultima slide è sulle sfide che ancora sono persistenti, dove dobbiamo ancora lavorare, la mancanza di donne nelle leadership. Qui abbiamo un esempio che riguarda appunto il campo politico, un seggio su 3 nei parlamenti e nei governi locali diciamo assegnato ad una donna. Logicamente le variazioni tra paese e paese sono molto notevoli, mancano spesso nei processi decisionali. Ancora registriamo disuguaglianze e discriminazioni sul posto di lavoro, a volte ci sono delle grandi differenze anche nella retribuzione rispetto alla differenza di genere, e dobbiamo lavorare molto proprio sul tema della violenza contro donne e ragazze, perché ogni anno 245 milioni di donne e ragazze in tutto il mondo, guardate che cifra assurda, impossibile, veramente insopportabile per una società che vuole definirsi civile, ecco, le donne subiscono una violenza di questo genere. Le donne più anziane inoltre devono affrontare tassi di povertà e violenza più elevati rispetto a quelli che sono i tassi di povertà che subiscono e che sopportano gli uomini anziani. Barriere legali e legislazione ancora poco applicata, sì, perché abbiamo magari buone norme che però rimangono nel cassetto, e questo non ci permette di fare quello scarto e di superare questi gap che riteniamo molto importanti.
So there is a lower presence of women in leadership, also a lack of women in many times in the governance, in taking important decisions. There is a gender gap in earnings, and there is violence. She was also stressing that 245 million of women and girls in 1 year in the world are subjected to violence. And also elder women have a higher probability to fall into poverty than men in the same age group. And most importantly, also, laws are not really, maybe they are there, but they are not applied or completely applied.
Questo indice di uguaglianza di genere è un dato che l'ultimo rilevamento è del 2023, e vedete che c'è un aumento dal 13 al 23 di 7 punti, che è una cosa importante. Logicamente le dinamiche all'interno dei diversi paesi sono molto differenti. L'Italia non è tra quelli che ha fatto buoni progressi, ma ancora abbiamo diverso lavoro da fare. Che altro aggiungere? C'erano anche alcune buone pratiche, ve ne cito soltanto una che mi piace sottolineare perché è molto importante. In un tribunale il presidente della Corte ha fatto un progetto con le scuole superiori, portando i ragazzi, per quanto permesso dalle diverse casistiche, a seguire le udienze penali nei reati di maltrattamento, associando logicamente il lavoro con gli insegnanti di diritto e di educazione civica. Ecco, questo a me è sembrato una delle esperienze più positive che ho visto fare, e che sicuramente rappresenta uno spaccato di vita reale, no? Che con cui impattare con i nostri giovani. Stop. Sì, allora questo è stato realizzato nel Tribunale di Terni, e quindi grazie, diciamo così, all'intraprendenza di questa presidente ha provato a strutturare. È una donna, sì. Sì, un uomo, no, purtroppo no, è stato un lapsus. È stato un lapsus. Io ho voluto istituire nel mio consiglio regionale una commissione specifica sulle donne. Logicamente la presidenza l'ha presa la maggioranza politica che governa in questo momento la mia realtà, e al di là di audire, diciamo così, alcune figure istituzionali più non abbiamo fatto, e di questo sono molto rammaricata. Però questa è un'esperienza molto positiva che accanto ad altre può essere veramente condivisa. Ho finito, grazie per l'attenzione, no, scusa per il tempo che mi avevo preso.
Francesco is approaching us and we change the presentation. I will summarize, I will take this time for summarizing that she was basically saying that the gender equality index in Europe that is issued by the European Institute for Gender Equality is now improved by 3% point. But there are lots of backlash in many countries, so the position is a bit different across Europe. But she was just leading us with this nice practice that has been put in place by a woman president of the tribunal interni in Umbria, that is to let students from the high school to go into the tribunal to assist to cases where they discuss about violence, and then they can see what is happening. And so I think it was very important. And Cecilia Robustelli was asking whether the person who was in the tribunal was directing the tribunal was a woman, and she happened to be so, not for a chance. We were commenting. So thank you so much, Donatella. And so since I'm going to take a bit like a few minutes to introduce you to Francesco Priari, who will be here. Is Director General Resources, Europe Innovation and Institutions in the Emilia-Romagna region. Emilia-Romagna since March 2016. He's also the Chief Digital Officer of the region, responsible for the management of human and financial resources, logistics, real estate, procurement, and organization and coordination of European policies, of their evaluation and of negotiating the international territorial cooperation, and many other things connected also to ICT, statistics, and as a part of these activities, he supports the administrative functions of the Emilia-Romagna region in Brussels, in the Conference of Regions, Rome, and of course, as I said, in Brussels. So we started with the European picture, and we now go to the region of Emilia-Romagna to share with you, in my opinion, a very important tool, instrument, system that is going to, in the future, but also now, can be very important also in terms of the gender impact of public policies. But the floor is yours. I don't have to just say anything. So.
Thank you, Tindra. Thank you to invite us to this conference. I would like to bring the greetings of our Minister applied to Gender Equality, Barbara Lori. In particular for you, Barbara Lori said that you met her 2 days ago, I don't know. And it is important for us to be committed in this policy. We invested a lot also in gender budgeting with you, because you planned our gender budgeting in Emilia-Romagna, and we realized the gender budgeting since 2017, I think, with you, and with the University of Modena and Reggio Emilia. So the experience that Tindra asked to me to show is Amartya. Amartya is a digital twin that reply the population of all families, all individuals, subjects in our regions, and also all firms. In this last case, we don't have exactly the knowledge of each firm because there are no. It is not mandatory in Italy to show the budget for each firm in Italy. So we have to realize a sample and realize some model in each industry, and reply the entire sample of firms. So what's the aim of Amartya? Amartya is conceived in order to predicting scenarios resulting for macroeconomic shocks, like I don't know, the increasing of some price, such as certain prices of, I don't know, raw materials, for example, in case of war, like in this case, and simulating the impact of public policies on businesses and families in our regions. We are making a lot of releases of this accolade. So if we want, I can anticipate that if we want to realize an arm of a market applied to gender equality, we need more time, and we need also to gather and maybe buy data from a lot of sources of data. This acronym is also realized in collaboration with the National Institute of Statistics in Italy, where the general director is my close friend. So we have the access to also this big data lake, but the problem is that the National Institute of Statistics doesn't map everything, and in certain cases some phenomena is described in a deep of 2 years, 3 years. So we don't have the current data about some phenomena. So the tool is a digital twin, as I said, in Emilia-Romagna, and the principle asking to this algorithm is evaluating inequality, for example, child poverty, employment or specific rate employment, and also redditivity, for example, for firms in such industry. It's very complicated because it's also complicated this epoch to define exactly which is an industry. No, because the digital transformation, for example, changed a lot the geometry of industries in our regions, in certain sectors. So the model is realized in this way. Families receive salaries by companies, firms, and families spend a margin part of this money to other firms in terms of consumption. That means that we can estimate also the demand in certain sectors in our region, certain industries in the region, like tourism, for example, in this season. But we have to consider in every case the main indicators of interest rate or other key indicators of some raw materials, and also, we don't know, some good where we depend. For example, the IT goods and also the IT license. Every organization depends from the pricing of the licensing. And we have to consider all that if we want to estimate the redditivity of companies and also of our organization, our region. And so we in this project are involved from the beginning the University of Modena Reggio Emilia, in particular the Department of Economy with Massimo Baldini, and also the University of Bologna, mainly specialized in the budgeting analysis in firms. They are a lot of key indicators analysis and deep 10 years, and this is very important. And also Prometeia, which is a consulting company specialized in simulation of scenarios in macroeconomic scenarios, also for our region. So, for example, we estimate with some multiplicators the impact of RRF funds, Recovery and Resilience and Recovery funds, in terms of occupation. And the result is that for each million we spend of RR fund, the result is 17 people applied in our regions. But the problem is that this indicator is linear, and in our life nothing is linear, nor the love, for example. Nothing is linear. So we have to simulate to realize a proxy for each of these indicators. And we already simulate these regional policies. care allowance for elders and disabled, rental assistance funds applied thanks to the municipalities. This is, I think, a policy interesting for you. And it is called at the nursery with the region. Our region is committed in terms of improve the ability for municipality to produce this service, and also introducing other 2 languages in the entire infant school. 2 languages because we think English is important, but also other languages, and the languages to which is, for example, the origin of the family. Hope on. This is Hope on is an English translation. We call it in Italy Salta Su. It is the free access to all public sector, all public transport for youth. Vacation for children, for example, family support. E-bike. We incentivate a lot of e-bikes and bikes. And the bonus school book. Our region is committed for the foreign people in terms of welfare. So we consider ourselves the Germany of Italy. We are also tied with Germany in terms of supply chain and also physical infrastructure. So differently than other northern Italy, our healthcare system is entirely public. So that means that we have also the entire database or data lake about diseases, treated act, and so on. So we can also realize a very performing algorithm in terms of healthcare system, and have this algorithm, this new modern public services entirely free for our citizens. This is our values, that are our values and our conception of well-being. So here we have some example of our goals. Unfortunately, in Italian, for our main instrument of planning, called DEF in Italy. So we have a lot of goals that we can investigate the next years if you want, and where we can find something about the gender equality, gender gap, and so on, because there are a lot of policies that can infer, not directly, but also infer in some cases also the gender equality. But here we have some example. The first data I would like to show is the ratio between employment rates and of women with children in preschool age and women without children. In Italy, this average is 72% in our regions. We are proud about that. We want to reach the 100, but there are also cultural biases that prevent this service. For example, in my family, I have a sister that don't like the nursery. No, she's a psychologist, so there are also some bias that cannot allow to us to reach the 100% of these services. But the 82% for us is an high level compared with the big regions in Italy. And also the municipality that can provide this childhood education. The average in Italy is 64%. In our region is the 93%, around the 93%. So, and the importance also of cultural biases, given by this consideration. For example, the reason why a woman in our region or a man ask the part-time condition in their job, in their work. And the reason why the woman asks this is why the woman wants to see way to take care of the family, but the man is concentrated on himself. So this is the difference between also, but in terms of data or planning an algorithm, it's also the evidence that we have to consider and to insert in the next arms we would like to develop some wages. If we call in mathematical terms, we have to consider wages. So that need to wage the heavy of each tensors that we have to insert in our algorithm. So we can consider our algorithm like a big amount of tensors, and these tensors are inferred themselves in some case with a linear function, in other case with other kind of functions. And if we have some parameters that can conditioning the access to some services, we have to estimate that and to understand also the culture of the women, for example, if these women come from different cultures, from different countries, and so on. Without that, this mathematical model doesn't explain exactly the behavior of a family. Okay, this is important. We have to translate also that. And this is a screenshot I try to open on Market, but it's very difficult because I think there are some security protection in your network. So, but I try to open Amartya and ask something to Amartya. For example, in this sense, we can in this screenshot, there are pictures. These are a picture. We can simulate a division between several classes of in terms of provinces, classes of economic indicator of wealth, for example, number of components. In this case, for example, for this policy, which is at nursery with the region, there are a lot of families with childhood. It is obvious. And in this case, we are estimating a spend of 18 millions, for example, and an average income from each family of 900 people. We can also estimate the consequences in terms of inequality of the immersion of poverty of these families. 900 euros are important for the poor families, like you can so we can also change these criteria and simulate also different criteria and offer this simulation to the policy making in order to estimate also the public expenditure, but also the consequences of this public expenditure, the basic KPI, and also the reflection in all characteristics of these families. And show all these consequences in map. We love the maps because, for example, the lower part of our map is mountain. And we have a lot of problems in this mountain because there are no youth there. There are no young people. And it is also given by cultural effects. You come from Umbria. I love Umbria because I come from Urbino. It's very close to Umbria, and I collaborate with the Umbria region. And we have a program in Italy called National Strategy for Internal Areas. Umbria is a big internal areas. So 5 minutes, yes, I conclude. So for us, the population of the mountain is a problem. Realize public service in the mountain is a big problem because we are no people. There are no public employees, for example. In this, also we realize some particular selection in this for this municipality. So we invest a lot also in union of municipality in order to reinforce the municipalities and the production, for example, of nurseries in mountain, because it is a big problem. No, we cannot convince any family to live in a mountain if there are no any public services. So also child transport for going to school, for example. And our mountain can reach also 200 meters, 2,000 meters above the sea level. So in some cases it is very high. And we can also select some particular policy. In this case, there are also a selection of only the mountain, and we can also select and conceive our policy only focused on the mountain or internal areas. Unfortunately, we have also an internal areas in the plan under the sea level, close to the Po Delta, so in Ferrara province. So also there are a lot of problems. We have a lot of problems, such the woman in occupation. So I tried to open a market in if no, a market is closed. I have to apologize with you, but I cannot. I try to. No, doesn't work. So I show the. Another thing, the last thing I would like to share with you is that Amartya can run thanks to Margherita. Margherita is a supercomputer and big data computer dedicated to the public sector in Emilia-Romagna. Margherita is both thanks to the National Cohesion Fund. It is the only region that both a supercomputer using a National Cohesion Fund. Margherita is dedicated to Margherita, a woman scientist. We had not choose an English name for our supercomputer. The importance of this supercomputer or the computational power is given by the ability to simulate all these things in few seconds. For example, Massimo Baldini required 46 hours before the arriving of Margherita in order to simulate one or two or three variables. Now with Margherita we can simulate 10 or 12 variables in 3 seconds. So this is the powerful, the computational power. And another thing that the literature, the business literature suggests to us is that each organization needs to have the competencies, mathematical competencies inside the organization in order to generate tensors and to manipulate data. Without that, without this ability, it's impossible for a consultant to give to some organizations a solution all in where simulate everything. Also, if this organization has gathered a lot of data. And this is important because it is a question also of human resources. We have a lot of women that are working now in the market, and young women, young mathematicians that are very enthusiastic about this project. Thank you very much.
Actually, I think it is really very much important. Also, the last, everything you said, but the last bit, I think it can be very important to be brought into classes, into the university, but also in early school, to see how powerful it is to be able to use data and use data in a way that you can also provide very important suggestions to the policy arena. So thank you also for
and also for the name chosen for Margherita and Amati. So thank you so much, Francesco Chiari. And probably I didn't stress this because I knew that I thought that you knew. Basically, the Gender Equality in Public Administration project has been co-founded by Region Emilia-Romagna. So we are very grateful to this contribution for allowing us to have also this conference. And we are now going to have the contribution of Gulay Gunluk-Sanesen, who is going to talk about measuring gender equality to guide a change in policies. She's full professor of public finance at the political science faculty in Istanbul University, where she has also directed the Istanbul University Center for Research and Practice in Global Politics and Management Global, who is also one of the research centers that helps us in developing this project. Publications are in the areas of gender budgeting, women's employment and glass ceiling, input, output, modeling, and security expenditure. He has implemented extensively well-being gender budgeting and human rights gender budgeting. So I leave the floor to Gulay, and I will be.
Thank you very much. Lara, it's a privilege for me to be with you today, and I must wholeheartedly congratulate you for the success of your project on gender equality and public administration, which I have been following in the process of it till now. So a big applause from me. Thank you very much. Now, as Tindara told about me, I worked, my background is economics, so I worked with data estimation methods, econometric modeling, input modeling, and it was a safe area. I realized later on that because, you know, in economics there are established definitions and numbers or the data. But once you move into the domain of social issues, then then it becomes a bit blurred. So I became more concerned later on in my recent work, especially in the area of gender equality or inequality, to clearly define what we mean and what we measure. And when I think Tindara sensed this, so she delegated this topic to me. So I hope I have done my homework. But it was also a pleasure for me to see that, to hear that both Donatella and Francesco mentioned some points which are also very crucial in my presentation as well. So we are on the same planet. Now, well, you're familiar with the European Institute of Gender Equality. They publish reports and they make some assessments, a generalization. And then, well, I took some excerpts from that to highlight some concepts which we very often use in our discussions or in our works on gender inequality, especially, which is employment, education, then the public authority responsibility, like essential provision of essential services. What do we mean by that? And gender gaps. Gender gap is the big concept that is our or a popular but very crucial concept in our research, in our works. And then, of course, this is reflected to political participation, the political domain. And then we complain about data is outdated and we don't have enough data, which I have suffered even in economics as well. I complained, but then I realized how hard it is to, how challenging it is to produce data, to measure the real phenomena. And continuing with the EU, with the AGE report, there is the workforce definition, workforce, and which actually implies a certain portion of the population. And then we come across with gender segregation, the concept. And of course, they all are reflected in the well-being or quality of life of women compared to men because of low pays, low prospects for future and advancement, or also pay increase, and also lower options for upskilling. So it's very obvious or established fact that gender inequality is multidimensional. And of course, there are intersectionalities between these dimensions. They are not independent dimensions. And also at individual level, we are talking about other intersectionalities like income level, race, or sexual preference, or gender type, etc. And not only the policies are because of this multidimensional, but they are also multi-institutional. I mean, a lot of institutions which collaborate both in terms of independent institutions and also within the institution departments. There's a multi-level governance issue where Paula will talk about, and also implementation of policies. So there are policymakers and practitioners at different levels because they are duty bearers, and on the other side, like myself, I'm a beneficiary, so I'm a right holder. And usually the policy design can be types of or areas of policy design can be crudely classified as focusing on empowerment of women and promotion of rights in general, therefore rights of women in general, because women's empowerment area is a bit still restricted, limited to income levels and agency probably. And a more holistic approach would be improving women's capability set. And my preference or my inclination is to consider gender equality and inequality, of course, in terms of women versus men, or maybe we are not restricted with the binary choice, but still a comparative context is, I think, more informative than focusing on women or other categories only. So these dimensions then require some indicators for measurement, and then they will be reflected with data. And that is why I'm again emphasizing the comparative approach to this issue. Now, I summarize here several concepts that we are using, or indicators, but we are using very loosely, actually. In terms of work, in the domain of work, we have several sub-dimensions, I would say, like labor force participation is a different concept. Unemployment, informality. Well, we discussed this with Piotr yesterday. That's why we're smiling. Wage gap or occupational segregation and glass ceiling. And some of them are also relevant for the power domain, but in a different sense. But the context is the same, of course. And when we talk about political participation, and if we have any political scientists here, they would have many sub-dimensions to reflect political participation, not only voting behavior. And of course, again, as I said, the further abstraction and a holistic coverage would be the well-being approach. Like when we talk about safety, when we talk about mobility, or access to information on public services, health, depending on the public administration structure, of course, we are much more demanding, and it is much more challenging to set our foot on firmly. So what we need indicators then, something we did not bother to think in hard economic issues like macroeconomic definitions. But then, as I said, with social issues and working with local public administrations on tackling these inequalities, we've come to realize that there need to be a common terminology or language that they should also adopt and follow. So indicators are common for language, and they are tools of analysis, and basically, of course, the data collection guide and data availability, but also quality is the weakest link in all our estimation and elaboration and assessment exercises. So these indicators have to be comparable, therefore they have to be specific, realistic actually, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. These are very restrictive, I would say. And in this sense, we use qualitative and quantitative variables, and they have to be, of course, verified. So what relevance does it to for policy then? Because it's a bit restricting maybe the context coverage of analysis the way the politicians see. However, in public administration, there is this the instruments of or operationalization needed for putting down inputs, outputs, and outcomes for efficient public policy. And then simply we can, what they do or what they use these for is to define the situation at a given point in time, and therefore realizing, recognizing the problem will also lead to the targets that they have to achieve. So, for example, 30 years ago, a prime minister in Turkey promised that if she's elected, actually she was elected, if she's elected, she will provide everybody 2 keys, 1 key for a car, 1 key for a house. It's economically infeasible, even, I mean, depending on the economic activity. But, politicians can be as extreme as that. Of course, not everybody, not especially local administrators, but this is just to emphasize what I'm trying to say. So therefore, these benchmark information will help to later on measure change if policy is implemented, and assess the progress in policies, institutions, and programs. So, and data, of course, has to be consistent and available. Now, therefore, measuring gender inequality is not a bottomless well, as some people would say, but it's not reduction to numerals, because there's practice in especially international organizations that we associate codes to some projects, right? It's just a very simplistic way for classification. They don't show anything, or we In Excel, we code women 0, women 1, then we say why are men 1, why are 0. But it's just coding, just for counting. However, when we associate the concept to the measurement, to ratios, then we're also a bit in trouble because we need numbers, but also what numbers are we using? For gender parity, are we using number of women over men, or are we using women in total? Generally, you see the titles because the tables need small spaces. But which total? Is it women and men together or among women? They tell a different story. And usually our coverage is like the AGA reports, the adults and working age, even in terms of gender, but it is not mentioned. Now, there are a lot of measurement instruments, very sophisticated, some of them at local life. Most of them do not have a gender dimension except the Habitat one. And we have very nice, very established gender inequality measures, but they are mostly national, they're aggregate. So they are for generalization, for ranking countries, but they don't give much information regarding what's happening inside, and especially what's happening with regard to regions. And that is much more depending. So I have some suggestions for public administration, and I'm glad that Francisco, okay, thank you, mentioned as well. But and I assume that gender inequality is recognized as a problem in the institute, as a policy issue. Otherwise, this is not, this doesn't mean anything. However, I'm asking you as well, do all the public administration at all levels provide information on the composition of their staff so that we can see occupational segregation, so that we can see glass ceiling, or so that we can see their recruitment policy criteria? This is the first starting stage. And later on, do we know their education levels? Usually, our research in Turkey shows that women are overqualified. Therefore, that is a kind of disguised source of gender wage gap, income gap, because they receive the same income at that level, whereas they're overqualified. And I'm running wage gaps and task delegation. And finally, of course, with regard to gender budgeting, do we have any information about the financial resources that they have power on? So because there's this segregation, there's segregation between departments, and power is there. And in service provision, you know what your public administration people ask you and demand information from you. They are usually done with surveys, which is quite problematic in terms of measurement. I can discuss it later on if you want. However, I want to emphasize the final item here, that is target population and the outreach. Because it's crucial, and I want to show it with an example from Turkey. This is a city in the less developed region in the southeast, and the local government is very conscious of gender inequality, and they report that they have provided literacy courses to women, and their output is 100 women. Now, in 2022, the latest available data, I checked, and the number of illiterate women there is about 40,000, and that makes over 90% of the illiterate people. So output itself is a success, but outcome in terms of the population outreach is what is important in terms of the well-being of the society. And so, of course, there are implications that it's not the task of the local government only to teach literacy. The national government policy has failed because of the lack of outreach, and there is primary education, which is compulsory. So the bottom line then is, yes, we need numeracy, we need statistics expertise and collaboration and multi-level division of labor, but collaboration between within the institution. But also we have to be aware, I wish Francesco was here, the computer programmers and mathematicians are devoted to numbers, but they and they sometimes have hard time with social issues. But once you're lucky to have such people, that it's heaven to work with. Well, and I want to also share with you one of my problems, which is the presentation of data and availability, of course, but presentation style is very much important to convey the information required, and also the graphs. So there's a warning from me, from my generation maybe, for infographics, because they're too overloaded. They look nice, the colors and everything, but you just don't register any message. So for the future, again, EGE is warning about the future challenges for gender inequality, again at work, again for adult women and men. But these are warnings, or these signal that policy outcomes are intertemporal and intergenerational. And this is the last stage that I've come to, that we focus too much on the adult working age, but we focus much less on the quality of and prospects of the younger people, and especially those who are an EETs. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
I just have.
So we will have another presentation now. Then we are going to have a small break. We're very small, because now we are going to have Paula Rodriguez Modronio, who is going to talk about multi-level governance for gender equality. She's professor at the Quantitative Method at the Economic History Department of Padre Olavide University, Civile, and where she teaches gender and work and gender development at the master program of gender equality and human rights. She holds a PhD in economics and an MPhil in development, and she's member of the UN Women Roster and Macroeconomic Policy and UNDP group of experts in unpaid work, economic development, and human well-being. She has been part of the European Network of Gender and Well-being, Work, Family and Public Policy, and Foresight for Regional Development. She's director of the project Gender for REV, Gender Inequalities in the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and she's director of the project Work-Family Balance in the Digital Era. And also she's director of the Center for Women's Gender and Family Studies, and director of the Master Gender and Well-being, Equality Director of Gender Observatory. So I will stop here and I will give you the floor.
Thanks, Tina. I'm tired of all those directions. I will be very brief because I'm very tired. So, hello everybody. I'm very happy to be here with you in Modena. I wanted to talk today about a very important aspect, I think, in the road for gender equality, which is multi-level governance. Though maybe it's a very complex process, so maybe it doesn't accelerate the speed, but you need it. No, you need to build the multi-level governance if you want to achieve real progress in gender equality. So I'm going to remember or to remind first some important aspects or starting points in the progress towards gender equality. I mean, I'm not discovering the new world with this. I'm not Columbus, not Galileo, but these are these are key. These are key things in the progress towards gender equality. First, we have to remember always that it's a historical process. It's not something automatic. We need time in the road towards gender equality, because gender equality is embedded in different institutional contexts and political and economic situations. And we have to remember that also when we design and we develop multi-level governance. So we have to see all the institutions and organizations that are key in our progress towards gender equality and include them in this development of gender equality policies. So it's going to take time, but it is a necessary process. Then we have also to remember that all the relational aspects in gender equality, because in this multi-level governance, we have to develop negotiations between different actors that have maybe different objectives, and that they are representing also groups with competing or interests also. So it's a complex process, but it has the negotiations of these different individuals have also very positive aspects at the end. And one of the positive aspects, I think, and the main important things and the objectives that we have to keep in mind when we are developing this process is that we want gender equality to be also institutionalized. We want these protocols and these procedures to be embedded in the institutions at the end. So if a new political party comes, they cannot change the situation so easily. So usually we will find resistance, we will find time delays in gender equality, but we will also create an institutionalized process that will also posit, for example, path dependence. So if a new government comes, they cannot change so easily all the policies implemented, all the organizations created, and all this multi-level governance developed towards gender equality. So, for example, if we are in an European country or European region, we will have different layers that have to be present in this process. We have the European Union, and it has been a key actor in the development of all gender equality policies in our countries and regions. We have also the presence of the state, the regions, which is very important in many of our countries because we have a lot of regions have a lot of power in most of them and a lot of competencies. And then we also have the municipalities, and inside the municipalities, all the community and all the groups. And then if we look at actors, we have to include in multi-level governance the policymakers, also trade unions. They are very important, and they have been very important, and all the economic and social key social organizations. Also, in the firms or organizations, it depends on where we are implementing, for example, the gender equality. We have to be very careful to include people at all levels of the organization. And this is very important to get all the relevant information, but also to involve everybody in the process so that they take an active part in the process towards gender equality. And then very important, I think, too, has been the role of women's organizations, feminist movements, and also civil society in general. And this is really important. For example, when some right-wing governments take power, and you need very strong feminist movements that can many times stop the movements that the governments want to do. And of course, in these committees that you have to create, in these monitoring committees, you need always gender experts, because well, we have seen also in Gulai's presentation, gender equality is a multidimensional process and concept, and it's not easy to achieve gender equality, no? Yeah, it's always changing, so you need people with a lot of expertise in this topic. So multi-level governance is difficult, but it's very useful for example, improving public decisions and policies to address current complex multidimensional problems such as gender equality. For example, the partnerships with experts, as I was saying, can build capacities for gender analysis while strengthening understandings of the gender dimensions. Also, for example, when you work with civil society organizations, they are very useful to identify potential corrective or additional actions through consultations with them. And gender experts and women's organizations are also gender relevant partners that also, as the European Commission say, and I says, they act as control towers in the watching over public policy processes. So now I just wanted to go through some examples. I have taken Spain as the example, not saying that these are best practices, but take it as examples of multi-level governance. For example, talking about gender equality, the advancement in gender equality plans in Spain and equal pay and pay transparencies. As you can see, I have put there like a timeline of the most important legislations. You can see that these are legislations that go through a very long period of time. You don't achieve gender equality in 2 or 3 years. You need a lot of time. You can also see there that there are periods where you don't have many important laws. Like the most important gender equality law that we had in Spain was in 2007. Still, that law in 2007 is called the Equality Law. It was more important. It was the one that introduced the concept of gender mainstreaming in all policies and in all institutions, and it mandated also gender equality plans. Here, they started with large companies. And then you can see that there is a period of years where nothing or not important laws are passed. This is also in this historical process. It is a period of economic crisis, austerity measures, and right-wing governments in Spain. So we have this period of time without important laws, but then it comes 2019, and then we have the introduction of gender equality plans, not only for big companies, but also for small and medium-sized companies. And then we had an important decree, which it was the pay transparency and equal remuneration between women and men in 2020 that is being implemented now. And it has led to important steps now in the last years. And also we had another decree, for example, well, it was the business association, the business confederation in Spain wanted to not wait for trade unions to do the gender equality plans in the films. So they say that if the film was small and they didn't have representatives of trade unions, they could do the gender equality plans by themselves, just the film. So the government say, no, you cannot do that. If the employees have not elected representatives of trade unions, then you have to include the trade unions that are the biggest in Spain, and you have to include them in the negotiations. So you can never escape the presence of trade unions in the definition and the implementation of the gender equality plans. I think this is very important, and it has been very important in Spain, the presence and the power of trade unions in the road for gender equality. And as you can see, we are having also other legislations about remote working and that. So as I was saying, it's very important. We have these two very important trade unions in Spain, Comisiones Obreras and UGT, and their role is crucial because they have to be in the negotiation of every labor law, of every labor reform, of everything in Spain by law. So, and for example, we were talking about multi-level governance and the importance of having multiple committees that advise you, no, in the definition of laws, in the definition of gender equality policies. This was created yesterday. It depends. It was created under the Ministry of Social Protection and Migration. Is the woman in the middle. Oh, 2 minutes. But it has also the Minister for Gender Equality, and it has experts from the academia, experts from that have been in the public government before, that has been in the in important feminist organizations. So they are included in this committee of experts. And well, I was wanting to talk also about the gender equality in the university because we have had a very important progress in Spain in the last years, and we had also a new law that of science and university, and we have, for example, the units of equality in the ministry and in all universities that are compulsory. We have the unit of women and science. We have an observatory of women, science and innovation, and we have different policies for equalities. So, for example, in the new law that was passed last year, we have this. This is contemplated, no, the gender equality under the perspective of intersectionality. So now we have gender parity in all bodies, councils, and committees regulated in the law. We have gender mainstreaming in the strategy and the state plan for scientific and technical research. We have data disaggregated by sex and gender. We had an important study last year with on gender wage gap in 22 Spanish public universities. That we could do it because we had the directive for gender equal pay. So we have the data. Through that directive, we managed to get the data from all universities. So as you can see, it's important to have all these committees and actors in multi-level governance. These are the priority areas. And for example, now we have included the elimination of biases and obstacles in the development of scientific careers. We had in April, we had a change in the selection procedure or the certificates that we need to advance in our academic career. And for example, the network of women in academia we were in the process of developing this procedure, and we managed to change many of the criteria that they wanted to implement to take into account gender equality. And we managed, for example, now we have 30 committees to evaluate our CVs, no, in this process, and there has to be a gender expert in every committee. So in economics, there has to be a gender expert. In law, in engineering, in all committees that evaluates they have to be a gender expert. So I think it's very important, and we are doing a lot of important steps in this process. So as you can see here, we have the networks, the EUFEM. This is the network of all research centers in Spain on gender studies. And we have another network, which is RUIGEU. That is the network of all gender units in universities that are in charge of gender equality plans. So their role is very important, and they are in the main negotiations of Spanish universities and of the ministry. Well, I have gender budgeting at the end as another example, but I think I'm going to stop here, no? To leave the others as a step. Thanks very much.
The time to start again, and since I'm going to take almost half an hour to introduce you, Angela Agan. She is Professor of Equalities and Public Policy and member of the Department of Social Science in Glasgow Caledonian University, where she teaches equality, human rights, and public policies. She's also Deputy Director of the Wise Centre for Economic Justice. She's also Chair of the Scottish Government Equality and Budgets Advisory Group and other advisory groups on social security and economic recovery. I will stop here and I give the floor to Angela, but I think it is very important to introduce each one of you, because I hope that this, after also this seminar, there will be the possibility of mobility and of meeting each other also in other occasions. So thank you so much. I will stay here.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you very much. It's nice to be, really nice to be back in Modena and to see some friendly faces from my last visit here. I'm really delighted to be back with colleagues and students, and to be part of such fruitful ongoing collaborations with Indra and colleagues. I don't want to be the spectre at the feast here, but I do want to, and some of this will be familiar to students who manage to seminars here in Modena in the winter. But the comments I'm making, and they actually go to one of the questions in the chat there, a question to Paula about what's happening in some parts of Spain. But the comments I want to make about understanding the institutional resistances and barriers that we meet to gender equality, because of course everybody supports gender equality. It's a good thing. We're all so politically committed. But I think we need to recognise there is a growing resistance and challenge, albeit in the face of huge scholarship that we're seeing today and every day in our work. The huge and long-standing activism and the politicisation of gender equality, all of which we've heard about this morning. But some examples at the front of my mind, again mentioned in the chat, the rolling back on one of the most established gender budgeting programmes in Europe, with the recent decision of the Junta de Andalucía to step back from gender budgeting. The UK government, the current UK government, personally, hopefully the outgoing UK government, we have elections this week, is openly against the teaching of equality, is openly and enthusiastically against the teaching and funding of equality, diversity and inclusion, is openly against the funding of equality, diversity and inclusion in the public sector, in public sector roles, and in the execution of policy making and service design, and is actively dismantling and defunding equality, diversity and inclusion in the public sector. We're on the precipice of elections in France, again, with some very extreme positions on the positions that those of us in this room and online would support. So, and the rollback of rights in the United States, I don't need to talk to an audience here about. So all around us and in each of our countries, we are facing really significant challenges, discursively, institutionally, and in terms of the structures. And so much as I have, the presentations this morning have been fantastic, and seeing that long time frame from Paula and the tendrils that there now are into institutions that make it so much more difficult to dismantle. But I do think we need to be alert, and it's imperative that we understand some of the resistances and some of the worries, the barriers that we face to advancing gender equality, and what can slow the pace of change. We're talking about accelerating the pace of change, so we need to be alert to some of what we come across on a daily basis, I think. And so mainstreaming, the great hope of mainstreaming, to integrate gender into all policymaking demands, changing institutional and organizational cultures. That was the great hope a couple of decades ago. But as others have pointed out since, the idea of gender mainstreaming required policymakers who are not gender experts to introduce a gender perspective into all policies. And that does assume a level of awareness, a level of skill. And for the 25 years of devolved government in Scotland, where we've had a Scottish Government, Scottish Parliament, with a series of very significant policy competences, I have been saying, well, we need to support the building of confidence and competence in developing gender analysis. 25 years on, that line is wearing a bit thin. You know, how long does it take to change? And I think, again, a message from this morning is how long things take to change and how quickly they can be reversed, because it depends on what kind of change we're talking about. And as other colleagues, scholars have pointed out over the years, gender mainstreaming implies a transformation of institutional and organisational cultures. And I think we have to question whether we actually see that in the everyday practices, in the ways of thinking and doing of political organisations, governmental organisations, and public sector organisations. Because I do believe that what continues to underlie those organisations and organisational behaviours are ongoing androcentric assumptions and norms. As Sylvia Walby said, again, well over a decade ago, feminism is inherently controversial because of the challenge it poses to established politics and power relations. We're still there, and we're there in many of either the nuances or the very deliberate construction of argument or polemic, whether that's around gender identity, whether that's around trans rights, whether that's around human rights and women's rights. There is a tendency, I think, to find a seam of disagreement and dissent that makes it possible to open wedges as well. But alongside that, we still, and we saw it with all respect in the construction of the regional policy discussion that we had earlier on this morning, where gender is located in regional policy, very much thinking about women as creatures of care and sympathy, as Martha Nussbaum has described women, and on the basis of those characteristics are devalued. And so the cartoon shows, again from Jackie Fleming, great English cartoonist, the text says, there's 3 men standing and 1 woman, and one man is gesturing to the woman and says, what we've decided to do is run our policies past a girl, just to see what they look like through her eyes. She won't be making any actual decisions, obviously, because how much of the representational politics, the representational structures do we continue to see? Absolutely. the point earlier on from Gulay about where are women, what roles do they have, and what control over resources do they have, what institutional power do women have. And so long as that androcentric bias, as evidenced by feminist economics down the generations of feminist economists, looking at those socially constructed gender categories and the value system associated with mainstream economic theorising, which of course comes into our public policy theorising, where those core values are the more characterised masculine values, scientific, rigorous, scientific, precise, objective, rational, of course. Autonomous, certainly. Rational economic man is both, isn't he? Formal, and then at the margins, humanities, intuitive, those softer characteristics that women do so well, and that's what we value. But it's a bit vague, always subjective, usually emotional and dependent. Dependent on what? Are women dependent on, or are others and other structures dependent on women? So, gender equality, is there a natural way of things, that natural way of the assumptions that we've just looked at there around women, instead of thinking about gender as a social construct and the construction of gender and the attribution of gendered meanings that are reinforced through state policy? And so we have to be bringing that gender analysis in at the very beginning. It's not an add-on. It's not, this is complicated and we'll get to gender later, with all respect. It has to be the starting point. How will what we are doing in public policy, whatever domain of public policy, make a difference to the status of women, economically, socially, culturally, and politically? And if it's not going to make a positive difference, then why are we doing it? They have to be the early starting questions in public policy. And so from Judith Squires to Ros Cavagan much later, gender mainstreaming in policy intentionally is about making policymakers identify and displace established practice and assumptions. But 20 odd years on, are we really there? Now, some time ago, 2006, Mika Verloo and Yvonne Benschkup said that this was a Sisyphean task. We're rolling the boulder up the hill and it's coming back on us, in their paper on Sisyphus Sisters. And as somebody who spends a lot of time with governments in a range of forms, I really feel that is it. Both as a hologram, in that I say the same things in many places, and sometimes wonder if we could just put a cardboard cutout on a recording because there's as much attention paid, and that it is an experience of making some inroads and it rolling back. And that requires tenacity, it requires resources, which very often feminist organisations, women's organisations, gender studies, feminist studies within universities and elsewhere do not have. And so that task is constantly as well relying on a lot of volunteerism and a lot of unofficial activity that is not recognised in the formal processes and resourcing of institutions. But then comes the kind of sticking plaster of the Gender Equality Awards and Gender Equality Characteristics and Gender Equality Advancement Programmes, again very much focused on women's representation rather than actually changing the organisation. I was asking Paula in the break there about the role of trade unions, and also seeing how, as I said at the start here, these tendrils that have come into the institutions and that make it so much more difficult to roll back. And that is really encouraging. But when organisations, and I cite my own, a few years ago introduced or refreshed the research strategy for the university, saying it was built around the Sustainable Development Goals. And when I asked the question about how we were going to support evidence and evaluate how research across the whole university was supporting sustainable Goal 5 on gender equality, there was a tumbleweed moment, as it hadn't really occurred as to how to mainstream that. So again, another moment where the boulder seemingly went up the hill and rolled back on us. So getting gender equality as a sticky the stickiness of it, that it sticks with, making it more difficult, as Paula has said, to remove following legislative or other change. And so we've got patchy implementation or dilution of policy. And Mary Daly was writing this nearly 20 years ago. Torfing, in their analysis, talked about reforming public policy depends on institutionalized legacies that structure our perceptions of problems and goals. So if there isn't a legacy of thinking about a gendered perspective, bringing in the data in the way that Gulay has described this morning, that define the issue, define the range of appropriate and feasible options, responses, then we're going to continue to perpetuate the kinds of conditions that are created and that we see again in another cartoon, where 4 or 5 men are around the table and the one woman there is told, "That's an excellent suggestion, Miss Triggs. Perhaps one of the men here would like to make it." I've had that cartoon on my office door for a number of years. And so are we seeing deliberate resistance? Or do we have a number of factors going on here? There's the deliberate backlash, the pushback, the resistance against progressive social change, absolutely. Common feature of the social world. So why then would political institutions, universities, or anywhere else be any different? When patterns of inequality and injustice shift, individual groups, especially those already advantaged by the status quo, will resist. They will want to protect the status quo. And so then we have the less overt resistances of inertia, the non-engagement, the understaffing, the under-resourcing, those silent aggressors, underpinned by insufficient gender training. And so Flood and others looking at this a couple of years ago were saying that resistance to gender equality is inevitable. It's diverse, contextual, and individual, collective. It happens more from men than from women in organisations, but not exclusively. And so they looked at the different types of resistance to gender equality, and I think this is what I would encourage colleagues to be alert to. In whatever capacity we inhabit our different organisations and our different social and political space. Denial, oh, there's no problem here, because of course we're all committed to gender equality. The disavowal, well, it's not really my problem. I mean, that doesn't really rest with me. I think you'll find that that issue needs to be taken forward by somebody else. So much for gender mainstreaming. Appeasement, oh, don't worry. Don't worry. It's all in hand. We have these processes in place. Appropriation and co-option, oh, well, look at what we're doing. Yes, I am looking at what you're doing and I'm not seeing very much. What's actually there beyond the presentation. Repression. Once it started, well, do we really need this? Have we gone far enough? How many times in my working life in different roles have I been told this gender equality business has gone far enough? Or my personal favourite a number of years ago was, how far do we have to go with this? As though there was an end point. Well, the end point would be equality, or possibly a higher ambition. And then, of course, violence at the institutional level of the types of institutional violence that many experience on a daily basis. And so what we see in operational terms is a dilution, and as Maria Bostello has called it, an evaporation of gender. Now read any policy document you like, and you will start off with a strong commitment to gender equality, absolutely. By the time you get maybe to paragraph 3, maybe to page 3, I'm sorry, where's the commitment to gender equality gone? Where are the tools, the processes, the resources, the personnel, the thinking to support that commitment? And so even within policies that are so-called gender equality policies, we see that dilution and evaporation, sometimes because there isn't the knowledge and capacity there to drive it, sometimes through organisational and institutional inertia, that they don't really want to carry it forward, and because the resources aren't there. Whatever the reason, it leads to policy failure. So how do we combat that? So we need to understand what's going on. We need to have the kinds of tools that colleagues have been talking about this morning, those tools and processes. Yes, it takes time, and we need visible, consistent, constant and coherent political will and leadership. And most recently, one of the reasons for my engagement with Tindara and the team here at the university has been through the Let's GE&PA project, working with research performing organisations. And so, reflecting from that project, Unimore said that to achieve the goal of gender equality, strong institutional engagement is needed, together with constant and daily dedication. This is an ongoing, every day, not on the monthly or the quarterly agenda, it's every day. Thorough knowledge of the methodologies, skills in negotiating, the acting for equality that Tindara evoked for us this morning, endurance and determination, oh my goodness, aren't they essential? And that the experience from that project has confirmed that there are real advantages to this process, individually, organisationally, and societally. And so the recommendations from that project were to have a committee, so have a structure that includes senior management, dedicated staff, so similar kind of structural approaches to those Paula has been talking about, with internal and external stakeholders, engaging decision makers with a clear training strategy, because how often do we see, yes, we're completely committed to this. Well, how are you going to build competence and confidence of others that you're looking to take with you? Well, you need to train and you need to have that resource and that resource applied. You need to apply gender budgeting. Where are the resources going? Who is allocating those resources and for what? And what are the gaps between allocation and spend? It's one thing to say you're going to do something, it's another thing to show that you have done it. And that's where the accountability and the reporting systems come from, with clear leadership across every department, and recognising, unveiling defeats is quite strong language, but recognising that we don't get everything right first time, and that's okay, because that's part of the learning process. Because how often have we seen, well, we tried that, no women applied. Well, what lessons did you learn from whether that recruitment process or trialing new modules or in degree programs or whatever? You can't just stop at the first. You need to understand why. We do it in our own scholarship, we do it in our own practice, so why don't we do it in gender equality in such a way that we can follow the internal guidelines that we have all agreed on in collective, and the tools necessary to drive forward gender equality. So these aren't just my recommendations, these are the recommendations from Unimore, and that's what I would like to leave you with, and to thank you all very much.
Thank you so much, Angela, and also for making us go back to reality that is not so nice at the moment. But I would like to give now the word to Caterina Arcimbrete. She's a development economist with a focus on child and dimensional poverty and well-being, gender issues and disability. She combines quantitative methodologies with qualitative and participative methodologies, and she holds a PhD in development economics and at the University of Florence. Well, I can tell you much more about what are the area of research, but I would like to stress that when she entered and we were discussing about the importance of also putting oneself in the public arena. So Caterina did so, and basically what we are very happy to know that she had a very she said for the election on the council of the municipality of Florence, and she's been more than successful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tindara. Thank you. Yeah, I would like to start with this because I was listening to all the presentations that I loved, of course, but the last presentation, I really could feel it. I was feeling like when you're at the concert and you start taking pictures. So probably you saw me taking pictures of your slides, because it's only like few weeks I've got elected, and I have the feeling of what you said, everything. So of this resistance, of how it is really difficult, even among your alliance, like to you feel a resistance. you feel it. And it can, I mean, I have never came across that classification, no illusion, or, but this is why it's tricky, because you can think that it's not about gender, that it's not about, you know, but it is actually is in a ways that are not always easy to identify as such. So I think that even for this very new personal path, it's for me very important to be here and to listen to what was said. But today I was thinking with Tindra how I could contribute to this like very high level panelists, and I thought that it would be nice to share some experiences that we have been having with my research center where I work, which is called Largo. It's based at Prato. It works with the University of Florence, where we have been recently engaged in doing gender auditing for private organizations. So, I mean, Tindra said where I come from, that it's more from development economics, but more recently I come across this new area for me, which is about private organizations. And the idea is to bring our shared expertise into the private firms. As was said before, private firms are part of the multi-level governance that must be engaged in promote gender equality. So they are stakeholders, they have power is money, they have money, so they play a role in promoting. So how do they do? In many ways, but let me start by saying what is gender audit. So gender audits can mean different things, but like more generally, they are voluntary tools that are used to assess compliance, internal organizations' compliance to gender equality, and to somehow check the institutionalization of gender equality within the organization. So basically, it helps to assess, you know, like differences, inequalities, to understand patterns, not only in terms of men and women in the different levels, but more in terms of processes and, as it was said before, organization culture. So the objective is to unfold and to make visible what it is invisible. Of course, it is based on a series of criteria. For example, work-life balance, pay equity, and there are many ways to do gender audit. And of course, it can give a baseline against which progress can be assessed. So as all the audits this year, you have achieved this this criterion, and then you have some areas for improvement, and let's see how it goes. In Italy, following European, of course, regulations, it was introduced in 2021, the Certificazione della Parità di Genere, with some of you have in this university a lot of experience with this. And it sets some areas where gender equality must be assessed, which are culture and strategy, governance, human resource processes, opportunity for growth within the company, gender pay equity, and work-life balance. So for the way it has been promoted and the criteria that has been included, it really aims to be somehow transformative, like not only changing the more superficial or the more visible, but to go where there are invisible inequalities. For each area, key PI, so key performance indicators, have been identified, and the company access to certification if it can reach the 60% of the indicators. Then the certification is re-evaluated, and it is really important that the company sets a strategic plan to improve the gender equality. As of today, this certification is considered a success in terms that it is going much better in terms of number of organizations that have been certified, much better than the expectations. So this is a good news. But my research questions that has not an answer because it's something we are really reflecting on. I mean, of course, it's a good result that many organizations have been certified, but we all know that we are not interested only in the certification. We are not interested in compliance only approach. We are interested in the fact that really these tools as gender auditing can be a transformative tool, and that is to challenge all that was said before, to challenge all the barriers, because some are visible, but again, some are invisible. So based on our recent experience, so we don't have such big experience, and that's why I really like to engage with others. We see that gender auditing can be done in many different ways, and sometimes it is made by external auditor, which is normal, of course, but they mostly rely on data collection and do mostly remote work that is collecting data, analyzing data, which is as an intrinsic values, because it of course gives a picture of how the organization is performing. But what we as organization, as a center, we try to do is to make this auditing process the more participative possible, meaning to include all the stakeholders in order to make valuable not only the result of the certification process, but the process itself. So the process of getting certified as an intrinsic value, because it can open a dialogue, because it allows different perspectives to be heard, and of course it creates awareness among all the different stakeholders within an organization. In order to do that, we need to use tools that are not only the tools that come from the law. There are some guidelines, but also some tools that derive from the participatory action research that, for example, within that we have been conducting, that gives the opportunity to different type and level of stakeholders to engage in a conversation about gender inequality within the organization. And they include, of course, focus group and interviews, but for example, also game-based policies. And there can be a variety of tools that within each context can be important to, again, make visible the invisible. Of course, participative audits must be adapted to specific needs and contexts, so it's more difficult to have a guideline saying we need to do this and this and this. So it calls for a more flexibility of approach. And another remark about this is the importance of internal staff, that is to work, the external expert must work together as tightly as possible with internal staff, not to have someone from the external that can give you expertise and then without giving who works there the expertise to do it. So for example, one approach could be, if you do it for 3 years, that the first year I do the external expertise, the gender audit, the second year we collaborate, and the third year I do the supervision, but you do. And this is, and another, participative auditing can be a tool. Another one is to, although the gender certification is a specific tool, a specific certification, but it is not independent on other reflections, on other aspirations. And so we all know, because we come from that word about the well-being of workers. So to make also people, stakeholders, more willing to accept changes, it's also useful to put it in a way that it's about well-being, meaning that by making, for example, the process more transparent, the professional careers more transparent, and by making better plans for home work balance, it's about well-being. And this, when we have been working with organizations and we use also this leverage, we find that it becomes more easy for them to accept some changes when they read them within the lens of well-being. And yes, these are just some, not data, but yes, they are some specs that show how today is more and more important well-being for the people who work. And this is a discussion related to the great designation, where you see mainly youth workers that really value their time, and they increasingly work as a life project and not only as a means for earning money. So this was just to stress the importance to link the few. The third point is about inclusive governance, which is the idea is that when you do gender auditing to an organization, not always the organization has an inclusive governance, meaning that the power is shared among different stakeholders within organization, and this can make it more difficult to mainstream gender transformative processes within organization if you only relate to the committee or to the general directors, but when you don't have the chance to engage with different levels of stakeholder. And then, of course, this is the plan, do, check, act approach, which is an approach that belongs to all the standard auditing processes, but it is inherent to the certification that they ask you to make objectives and to do plans and to reach them. So I conclude saying that trying to engage as much as you can stakeholders is crucial to ensure that the tools such as gender voting are not only do not only serve to fulfill regulatory requirements, that in the absence of inclusive governance, participative auditing can work as a catalyst for challenging and reforms models, and that participative auditing can potentially strengthen cohesion and collaboration, and also a culture of more attention to well-being of employees. Thank you.
So now, just to conclude our very intense conference, I wanted to share with you some ideas I have about transformative policies towards gender equality and how we can develop, and we try to develop alliances. So basically, just getting to the point, I would like to stress the importance of even before starting thinking about what you can do in terms of gender equality. Sorry, that was for you. So you were more than in time. Thank you. So please do the same with me. So basically, we think, and I must say we think, because I think that many people inside this room have the same vision, that it is important to put a framework, to share a framework, a theoretical framework to the work that then you are going to do. So I can express that in order to base the transformative policies and also to design transformative policies, as I speak as a research group, And of course, Antonella Picchio is with us in terms of this, because we share the importance to have an extended macroeconomic framework, including social reproduction, and to have the focus on well-being, considering it as a dynamic and multidimensional construct, and also making visible inequalities within each well-being dimension. So in order to embracing this Amartya Sen and Martha Nussbaum capability approach, we think it is very important to tackle inequalities in well-being. And how we can do it? By doing a gender-sensitive analysis of the context that is going to be to look at each one of the dimensions in terms of gender inequalities, and also by evaluating the impact of public policies with this perspective. So starting with this, we did develop a new way of looking at gender budgets, that it is by using well-being gender budgeting. So basically, it is very interesting to say, and I must say this with really happiness on this, because we're starting even thinking about the possibility of having a new way of looking at gender budgeting by the implementation of gender budgeting to the region Emilia-Romagna. This happened like 2002. And now I'm really proud of the fact that by using a way of approaching also the institution, that it is trying to get the institution with you and trying to, to the people in the institution, to train them and to let them be motivated by the fact that by going ahead with gender budgeting, they could be also more aware of what they were doing and how the inequalities can be contrasted, or without having this vision, they can stay there and not be moved at all. So the idea is well-being gender budgets. So we build a matrix of capabilities, shifting from the usual attention only to the account-based, on mere allocation of means, to accounts on what this is going to reflect in terms of well-being ends. So we do look at different dimensions of well-being in terms also of the inequalities, gender inequalities in each one of these dimensions. So what I'm showing here is being aware, because I think also the presentation by Paola Rodriguez Madroño really let us understand that it is very important to see the different level of government, how do they interact. And so what we try to do is also to look at how different levels of government could have an impact on different dimensions of well-being. So here, as you can see, we have the municipality, the district, the region, the state, and we could have seen in the presentation by Paola that there is a very important role. If you would like to do something that at the point there is somebody else at another level of governance say, you cannot simply do so. There is the importance of unions and the importance they to be part of the process. But also within the same government, we could look at what is happening on the different dimension of well-being in terms of each one of the different area of our government. And it is very interesting to see that there can be synergies, but at the same time, as also Angela was telling us about, you can say that you are very much keen on gender equality, but then you can have two different departments. One is implementing a policies that without the gender lenses is definitely getting back to lower employment for women as the impact. And the other instead is saying, look, we should have childcare facilities. This is very important for the development of children and for the labor supply of the parents, of the people who take care of them. So it is very important to get this vision, this path, but also it is important to bear all the organization with us. And in doing so, I would like to stress this important point that most of the time we go and look at starting for a public institution, we look at what the public institution is doing in the context. That, of course, is extremely important, but sometimes we neglect what is doing inside the institution. So we could have a very gender unequal institution that try to promote gender equality. So the importance for us is to look at the organization by developing a matrix of capabilities and looking what is going on within the institution. And also, I would just like to spend a few words on the importance of planning gender equality. And that brings us back to gender equality plan. That brings us back also to the fact that some countries, like Spain, have introduced them beforehand, that they were now a prerequisite to access to Horizon Europe. But also we have a special line on the Recovery and Resilience Fund in Italy that is devoted to research, where we not only have the requirement of gender equality plan, but also the requirement of gender budgeting. So planning gender equality and gender equality plan. Then in order to do so, as was stressed by many of the people, the experts before me, it is definitely important to involve the whole organization by initiatives of raising awareness, but know the context. It is very important, as also Gulay was reminding us, measuring what is going on. What is the situation in terms of your own context on gender equality? So you must map inequalities and also make invisible gender stereotypes. So that is something that we did during the Let's Jobs project, because we had a survey at the level of each one of the RPOs in our institutions that included an IAT test in order to see, by using implicit association test, what was the level in the different part of our institution in terms of gender stereotypes. And I must ensure that there were many. So it is very important now to take action, to know that it is not for a chance that you might not be able to progress in a certain area, if that certain area is full of gender stereotypes, implicit or sometimes also explicit. So it is important to have training sessions, but they are not, should not be superimposed by the fact that other institutions are doing that and different training sessions, but by the knowledge of your own institution. But I want to again go back to Europe, because definitely Europe is, and we hope it will still do so, because it is extremely important what was done for our RPOs in terms of gender equality plan. Because if we go and look to the Horizon Europe guidelines, they say very neatly, so this is what I would find in the guidelines, a gender equality plan is a set of commitments and actions that aim to promote gender equality in an organization through a process of structural change. And the gender equality plan aim to promote gender equality through the sustainable transformation of organizational processes, cultures and structure that produce and sustain gender imbalances and inequalities. So it is quite a hard concept of gender equality plan. And together with some colleagues, including Carlotta Barra, Ilenia Picardi, and Esther Cois, we started looking at what is in place in terms of the gender equality plan of the Italian university. But we can see that in some cases there is something promising. In other cases, they seems not to be really able, by the action there, to guide a transformation. And also this, again, I go back to Let's Jobs, and I thank Angela for having reminded us what were our findings by implementing gender equality plan. And one of the vision that we had at the very moment of applying for European funding was that, in our opinion, having a gender equality plan without any interaction with gender budgeting was something that could prevent to being transformative. because then we look at the gender equality plan actions, but we have to do auditing on whether the resources allocated, both the human resources and money, are going to be really allocated, and also to evaluate each one of the program, but not only the one of the gender equality plan that could be 1% in all the amount of the expenditure, but all expenditure, a revision as to all the institution. And if we don't do so, these gender equality plan are really, it's really difficult that they can be really transformative. So basically, then I come to the last point of my presentation. We have now LPOs across Europe that have been or are trying to be transformative and transformed by gender equality plan. Then in that case, we can also consider the possibility to interact with local governments, with regions, with national government, with the European Commission, in order to basically transfer our knowledge after a process, for instance, in Italy, where the regions and the local authorities were the first movers in terms of gender budgeting and process of gender equality. And in a moment where there are evident, as Angela reminded us, backlashes in what is going on, and we are very helpful, we are very happy about Caterina in the municipality of Florence, but what is going on basically, that we can, as RPOs, given that we have been in a sense touched by this European project of gender equality, and try to get back to the institution that they might not be so gender sensitive, but let them know what is going on if you look at gender equality, and if you do really enact a transformative process. But that cannot be done in just with this relation, but with a public institution or with the European Commission. It is definitely essential to have to keep our interaction with the NGOs, the organization, both of the private and the for-profit and non-profit sector, because and also the funding organization, because at that level we can really try to have a more extended network that is going in, especially in the times that have been reminded us, guide us towards a path that otherwise can be interrupted. So that is it from my part. I hope I was able to stay in time, and I thank you so much for your patience to follow us during all these hours. Maybe there was a question from the floor, or there is also a question from this floor. Or if you would like to raise a question. There is a question for Paola. How do you assess the attacks from the right, increasingly closer to the extreme right, on regulation linked to equality? Is it showing that institutionalization is weaker than we thought? Worrying trends in Andalusia, new laws against the gender budgeting. That is very important also for our master degree students, because she's making a case on Andalusia. For example, Valencia against European projects that financed the visualization of the genealogy of women in science. So there are some points here for you to be included in the academic programs and so on. Thank you a lot. So this is a question from Paola. I don't know, from Yolanda Giubetto. Yolanda is a really big expert in terms of gender budgeting. So just tell us what is happening in Andalusia about the gender budgeting. Maybe you should come here because of the mic. And the mic is here. You can also take here.
Yeah. Well, hello, Yolanda. I was with her in an online meeting last week. She's an expert on gender budgeting from the Basque Country in the north of Spain. And this reminds me that we are organizing the next conference on feminist economics, Spanish feminist economics, next year in October 25, the first week. You want to come? It will be in Seville.
Fantastic.
She's also in the organizing committee. Okay, I didn't arrive to the point. I have it at the end of my presentation, the case of gender budgeting. We are in a bad moment now in Spain and also in my region, because we have had the conservative government in the region for the last 5 years or 5 years. So they changed the law, the regional law, in February, and they stopped gender budgeting in the region. So it's going against the national context, because in the national context last year they issued a law that is more in favor of gender budgeting. But now the regional government changed the law. They issue a new law based on rationalization of public services. And with this rationalization, they downloaded the requirements for the gender budgeting. So we have now gender impact report, but they stopped the gender audits in the region. And they closed the gender committee, the gender monitoring committee that we have. So they also stopped that law. So yeah, it's a very complex process with all these agents, no, involved. But you have the national government, you have the region. So many times, that's why I was saying, and many times they are competing and they have different interests, and it's problematic. I don't know what will happen in the next months, because this just happened in February. And the other example that she was talking, yeah, for example, Valencia.
Valencia against European projects that financed the visualization of the genealogy of women in science.
They stopped it now. I didn't. Well, because Valencia was one of the big pioneers in integrating the gender dimension in research, because they had a woman in charge of that was very feminist. She was in academia, she was a sociologist, and she incorporated
the name of the
Capitolina.
Ah, yes.
Do you know her?
Yes,
no?
yes.
So when Capitolina was in the regional government, she introduced the gender dimension in research. So that's why I also pointed to the relational aspect, and to have some individuals that maybe sometimes they are key and they are able to do critical junctures, no, and critical steps towards gender equality.
So it's very sad about Andalusia, because we always talk about Andalusia, the G+ method, so yeah. It's really incredible.
Yeah.
It's author also the special issue on gender budgeting. So are there some other questions also from the floor? I think.
Just a very quick remark.
Go, Cecilia. Cecilia Rostelli. Probably because if you come closer to the mic, it's better. Okay. Do you want to sit here?
No, it's okay. We'll be very quick. Just taking some notes. So during this very interesting, let's say, convention today, I had many interesting insights, and but I was very surprised because I didn't hear the use of a word which so far has been considered transversal to gender equality. I think I read once on the screen in one PowerPoint, but no one else has mentioned this word. And this word is language. And I had this strange feeling of sort of, I'm using one of your words, Angela, vaporization of the importance of language. In your last remarks, Tindara, you wrote that we need to be visible and we need to make gender stereotypes visible. One of the main and most powerful instruments to make something visible is to use language to say it, because it makes it visible within our experience and into our mind. Definitely. So I really, just want to, I would like to remind you of the importance of language and of the meaning of language. Because using a language which is not adequate to gender policies makes policies inadequate, makes them much more weak. It is not easy to make people who are not sensitive to gender sensible to gender. And if you don't use an appropriate language, then you fail. So I just wanted to remind all of us of the importance of language, which is the most powerful instrument to make gender inequality and equality visible. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I would like to stress for also the people who are now connected online that Cecilia Robustelli is also, well, you know her as a very important in Italy for us, and also not only in Italy, internationally known as expert on gender sensitive language. And also it is very important to let all the institutions, private and public, every institution know that there are guidelines, and Cecilia has been basically writing guidelines on gender sensitive language. But the point is that as we know, with law, many times we are really stuck by the fact that institutions, even if they say they are gender equality sensitive, they show in the very communication and in the language that they are indeed not sensitive at all. So we can conclude also by a warning to each one, even our institution, to be really sensitive also in terms of communication and language. So I can see that my language is being changed in Italian. I don't know, talking about. So the point is, especially, of course, there are languages that are more exposed to this problem, but definitely something that we should be aware of. And I thank a lot Cecilia for having reminded. So it's time now to wrap up, and thank you so much for being with us, also the one online. Thank you so much. We had some like 50 people connected online, so thank you so much from different places. Thanks.